Hey, it's Jeremy Osterberger. We're here at the PerspECCtives annual conference in Colorado Springs, and I'm here with Greg Sizemore. Greg is Vice President, Health, Safety, and Environment and Workforce Development for Associated Builders and Contractors National. Correct, Greg?
That is correct. Washington, D.C.
Well, Greg, fantastic. Thank you so much for being here at the conference. Greg, you've been to ECC before?
I've been around it, but never been to the conference. I have a lot of colleagues that I work with, both on a contractor level before I became an ABC employee.
Sure.
I actually worked in the contracting community, so I got to see a lot of people that I hadn't seen in many years.
Well, Greg, I want to get right to it because your presentation was hard-hitting here at ECC and very important. So, Greg, we talked about safety under the hard hat and why mental health matters. You know, Greg, I've been around this industry ever since I was a kid. My father was a EH&S specialist for Dow Chemical for 40 plus years. And I always thought of safety in relationship to PPE and safety requirements and work permitting. Today we talked about something way more serious. And I want to give you the chance to talk about your topic and let's get into wellness as it relates to craftsmen in the construction industry.
It's very interesting, Jeremy, when you talk about this. It's exactly right. The knee-jerk reaction for so much of this is to go straight to what can we do to help them be safer. But you can have an unhealthy person acting safe and still have incidents and accidents occur. And so the whole mindset of safety under the hard hat is simply this: who's wearing the hard hat? Now, are they fit? Are they engaged? Are they there? The example that I used this morning was Mr. or Mrs. construction worker coming to your job site anywhere in America. You never know what happened before they left the house that morning. Mm-hmm. They found out that their mother has dementia, or their son's a runaway, or their daughter's an addict, and they're supposed to climb out of that steering wheel and walk onto your job site, and everything's okay, and that's not okay. So it's a knee-jerk reaction for us to look in the direction of what we've been almost conditioned to look at, very, very, very critically, I might add. But this new paradigm of making sure that we're looking at who's wearing that hard hat, who's in the PPE, is the next paradigm in world-class health and safety in our industry.
You know, Greg, something that hit me are the numbers, and sometimes numbers don't have context, and we'll get into that context. But let's talk about the numbers.
Yeah.
What are we talking about here when we talk about wellness and suicide? What have we seen? I think the numbers you showed were from 2018.
Well, so there is a reason the data lags in that arena, and you'd have to think about this. Just because Joey left a note doesn't necessarily mean that it was a suicide. So there's an investigation process, and I don't want to give anyone the idea that these are happening on job sites. But in 2018, the Center for Disease Control released some data and said that year there were 1,008 human beings walked on the job sites in America that did not go home in the evening. That same year, though, we had 5,242 deaths by suicide of those men and women that work in the construction industry. That was a catalyst to many of us in the association world and among membership that are working in that arena to say, we've got to look at that.
Greg, I want to get into stakeholders. You know, you said that buy-in for wellness has to come not only from the C-suite, but all the way down to the concrete. I love that statement. Elaborate on that if you would.
Well, buy-in is critical. We listened to a speaker this morning talking about being okay to be uncomfortable and being okay to deal with the unknown. And when you think about mental health, we also have some paradigms that we go to in that arena that says, okay, that's an HR function, that's a HIPAA function, that's this. And the reality is it's not. It's about those people creating that culture of care, right? The CEO drives that. Those in leadership truly drive that culture. If they're not controlling it, somebody else is, and that's the bad side. But the C-suite to the concrete mentality is let's put the tools and resources in place that your leadership team is now pushing out through the organization.
Greg, you commented on something called the Trident effect. Can you tell us about what the Trident effect is?
Yeah, so that's my own little unscientific way of saying something. But, when we think of there's three real big drivers to this, and let me give you some more context. In America today, the highest rate of suicide is 47-year-old male. Okay, just lay that on a shelf by itself. Now, when you look at the Trident effect, the first one is when we have a very aged workforce, Jeremy. The average age of a construction worker in America today is between 42 to 45 years old. So you're right on that cusp. When you say the average age, you've got a big block of people that are on the north side of that. And the reality is we're not taking the pressure off these people. They can't perform at 45 like they did when they were 25. And as a result of that, they're often taking on coping, whether it be pain pills, whether it be legal or illegal substances, whether it's just going out with their buddies and staying out all night. The reality is it eventually catches up with that human. And they're somewhere in America working on a project somewhere, and they realize they're a raving alcoholic or they're ravingly addicted to something. And so we see a high rate of chemical dependency based upon, repetitive musculoskeletal injuries at 47 years old.
Sure.
And so that addiction is another big driver for suicide in that age group. So number two is this natural crosswalk, Jeremy, of the veteran community coming into our industry. Many of the skills transfer role to role, job to job, person to person. And while I want to be upfront and say, listen, the veterans aren't asking for any special privileges, we have to recognize that in theater and even out of theater, many of the experiences of this veteran community coming in here are a lot different than what the average person may see in a construction project. And so I use the analogy sometime, if they were ever in theater, they probably saw more on a Sunday afternoon while you were watching your favorite NFL team. And somehow we think just because they walked out the front gate of some military institution that all of that's in a bucket somewhere.
That's right.
It's not. And the last is certainly this new social construct where it's almost normalizing suicide as a way out. If you look at society right now, the CDC says if you look at this, the total impact on America when it comes to youth suicide will not be realized from just COVID-19 until 2025, which will be next year. They said it'd be 5 years out, that isolation impact of this youth that we're seeing. And by the same token, social media is pumping this information out there. And so there's a new perspective coming into our workplace when we start talking about those men and women. Look at their stars. You hear stories of professional athletes that they put on the paper, death unknown, and then 3 weeks later you find out that they died by suicide. And so the trident effect is really that. We've got an aged workforce. We've got a strong veteran community in our workforce. And we also are trying to bring new youth in there. And between all that, we've got a perfect storm that if we don't start embracing this at the highest level of our organizations, Jeremy, we're going to be dealing with this 20 years.
That's right. Greg, incredible. Appreciate your time so much. I have one more question for you, and that is to act, right? How do we act? And one of the things you mentioned was ABC's program, Total Human Health. Tell everybody about what that is.
So context is when we saw the data come out in 2018, obviously our membership stood up, which is, primarily commercial and industrial construction or contractors, said we need to do something about this. And so we really began to partner with some suicidologists, some mental health professionals, and we created a framework that is based on what we call a total human health approach. It's the body, mind, soul, and the heart. Why do people come to work? Are they fit, ready to do their job? And so this framework is, again, out on the front place of our website. We don't say this is proprietary. You don't have to be an ABC member. ABC members set this up to be put in place. We have resources that we've already put in place for many of our members, but the framework is the framework. And that total human health is looking at that entire person, the body being a big piece of it, but that mind, where are they at connected? Where is their spirit? Are they in a good place, good space? And what are they there for? That heart, what is their drivers behind that? So that total human health. In addition to that, when we saw the data, again, catalyst causes good change sometimes. We began to look at this in Washington, D.C., and Stuart Benstock with the Construction Financial Management Association got hold of a letter from some friends of ours in the industry, Cal Bauer and Sally Spencer Thomas, about suicide in the construction industry. And we're like, oh my God. So we have now stood up the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. You can find their website at preventconstructionsuicide.com. We're known as CIASP on the street. And if a contractor doesn't know how to get started, the first place is to go there because there's toolbox talks. There's, all kind of resources there for them to implement education and awareness in their company because it is an uncomfortable topic. It's not squishy. It's not easy. Again, you can go to abc.org and visit our safety tab and look for our total human health section, or the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention, which is a nonprofit organization that has been stood up. This problem is labor neutral. This problem is bipartisan. This is not about what color Kool-Aid people drink. I don't care about your secret handshake. I don't care what your colors are. I'm telling you, the men and women that make up our industry out there are struggling with mental health issues, and we can choose to ignore it, or we can choose to do something about it.
Greg, we're going to end this interview with that content. Greg, thank you for being a catalyst for mental health awareness.
Well, my pleasure to be a part of this entire event, and thank you for taking the time to have this conversation.
It's an incredible community, and glad you're a part of it.
Thank you so much.